We are on live. We can start.
Okay, sir. Good evening, all. Hello, ma'am.
Hi, Pooja.
Uh, Good evening, all. I welcome you all to today's webinar session. This is Pooja Kashyap, your host for today's discussion. I am here again with another session on transgender and gender equality with Enajari. Before starting, I would like to brief you all about Enajari. Enajari, in simple words, literally means the bond of love. Milind Datta is the founder of Enajari, and it is his love for his native land that brought him back from USA to Assam in order to start this non-profit organization that engages and promotes various initiatives such as striving for social change, loving leadership qualities, and leading and building entrepreneurship capacities amongst the people living in Northeast India. For a couple of months now, we have been interacting with speakers from different regions via virtual media on the topics that are current and significant in today's generation. Moving forward, we have Tanvi Bhati as our honorable guest speaker today. The topic of today's webinar session is National Education Policy 2020 and the gender question in today's school education. Now, let me introduce our audience to our guest speaker today. Tanvi Bhati is a sociologist by profession and currently teaches sociology to postgraduate students. She completed her undergraduate, postgraduate, and research studies at LSR, DU, JNU, and SAU. Her research interests are peri-urbanizi- peri-urbanism, gender and space, anthropology of the everyday life, village and agrarian studies, pastoralism, sociology of education, women and tribal issues. Apart from teaching, she is presently trying to understand the rapid change, contestations, and complexities in the urban village and how this impact everyday lives and lived experience in the Delhi NCR. I welcome you, ma'am, to today's webinar session, and now I would like to ask you to take over the mic. Please, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Pooja. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for sparing your evening. I want to first thank Anna Jori team and Kashmira and Milin if he's attending for giving me this opportunity of engaging with the audience on the issues of gender and sexuality. I also want to congratulate Anna Jori, which is connecting and promoting initiatives of different kinds and striving for social change and entrepreneurship in the Northeast India. Your work is commendable, and I'm happy to be here. Uh,
Thank you, ma'am.
After today, particularly, I'll be focusing on NEP and how we can look at issues of gender and also some of the solutions, some of the ways in which we can move forward. Now, after a gap of 34 years, the government of India had released the National Education Policy 2020, which proposes a major revamp for the country's education system. And before this, previous policies had come in 1968 and 1992, respectively, and taking into account the global as well as the local demands of education, the National Education 2020 policy focuses on imparting 21st century skills among students while mentioning full equity and inclusion. So in my lecture, sometimes I will quote from the text also. I'll quote from the policy as well. So it talks about full equity and inclusion as the cornerstones of all education decisions. Uh, Firstly, I want to mention here that the NEP 2020 provides a broad direction and a framework, and it's available in both Hindi as well as English language. While it is not yet mandatory, its recommendations can pave the way for future legal directives or notifications once formalized through a legal document or a gazette. The beauty of NEP 2020 lies in its ability to provide clear guidance while granting institutions the autonomy and flexibility to interpret, to expand, and to adapt its framework to suit their specific needs according to the time and context. And this also empowers institutions in a way to implement the policy so that they can pick and choose what is relevant to their unique circumstances. Today in this webinar, I would like to explore how we can approach the NEP as a guiding document to engage with gender issues, particularly within the school setup. And this is crucial because all of us, we have experienced schooling, and some of you may already be teachers, counselors, or administrators, or may take on these roles in the future. Moreover, for students of social sciences, some of our students from our department, they're also here, and some of our alumni are also here. Specifically, those who are aspiring to become social scientists, it is vital to read, listen, and thoughtfully reflect on the world around them, and particularly a world where NEP 2020 has emerged as a significant and influential framework. I'll also try to avoid academic jargon, as many of our viewers may come from non academic backgrounds as well, and I'll try to make the content as simple and accessible as possible. Now, many of you have read gender. It was in the title of the webinar. And when you read gender, I'm sure some of you might be thinking that I'm here today to discuss the problems of women or problems of girls. I am not. Let me tell you, I'm not here to discuss the problems of only women or girls. I'm here to go beyond that. Uh, Now, this is not something which is new. When you look at regular conversations and even initiatives which surround gender equality, there is often a presumption that gender based discrimination and inequality can be resolved by focusing only on women. And gender issues are frequently mistaken as being synonymous with what some of us, refer to as women's issues. And as a result, even seminars and conferences which focus on gender equality, they often turn into platforms where women discuss matters which only concern women, right? Women discuss matters with other women regarding women. While these dialogues are important, they also alone cannot address the vast issues of gender inequality. Uh, Now, when you look at the issues of transgender, although transgender individuals are increasingly being included in these discussions, men are often largely left out of the conversation. And true gender equality, I'm sure all of you will also agree, it requires the participation of everyone, be it men, be it women, and it includes people across the gender spectrum, and engaging men, transgenders, women, and everyone else whom we are not taking names. Engaging people in these conversations is critical to fostering understanding, breaking down harmful stereotypes, and promoting a more inclusive approach to resolving gender inequality. Now, as you delve deeper into the topic of gender, you'll find that it is a social construct that influences the attitudes, roles, responsibilities, and behavior patterns of boys, girls, men, women, and others in various societies. And these gender relations can vary significantly from one society to another. And importantly, gender identities, they are not limited to a straightforward male and female binary. Rather, they exist along a broad spectrum of gender and sexuality. And understanding this spectrum is very important. It's crucial for for having a comprehensive view of gender dynamics and understanding the diversity of human experiences. Now, I'm here to discuss the issue of gender, keeping the NEP 2020 document in mind. However, before we proceed, I feel it's important to first understand what gender actually means. And to understand gender and to grasp this concept, we first need to familiarize ourselves with three important terms. I call them the key terms, three key terms. First is gender identity, second is gender expression, and the third one is physical sex. Now, when you look at these three terms, they are interconnected. They represent different aspects of gender, and understanding them is essential to fully comprehend this whole idea of gender itself. Uh, I don't know how many of you have seen a gender unicorn. If you Google it, you'll find a unicorn of different colors, and we can use that unicorn to understand. It's called the gender unicorn. We can try and understand gender identity, gender expression, and physical sex from there. Now, I'll first talk about gender identity. Gender identity refers to how a person perceives themselves. It is their internal sense and personal experience of gender, and only only the individual can determine their own gender identity. And it's important to note that gender identity is different from sexual orientation, because sexual orientation pertains to a person who is attracted to based on gender. So, common terms which are used to describe sexual orientation, for instance, include gay, bisexual, lesbian, heterosexual, or straight. Now, gender binary is a problematic assumption which says that only two genders either you're a man or a woman, or you're male or a female. It believes in that this idea of gender binary. And the other idea which is associated with that is that these binaries, these categories are distinct and they remain same throughout life, that it's unchanging. However, there is also a growing awareness, particularly when you look at the literature which is emerging, and the work of civil society also. There's a growing awareness and support for various identities which exist outside of this binary. For instance, we have gender queer, gender non-conforming, gender non-binary, and individuals who do not identify strictly as a man or a woman may identify sometimes as both genders, or neither genders, also somewhere in between, or not even gendered at all. And recognizing and respecting these diverse identities is essential in fostering an inclusive understanding of gender. Moreover, a person's gender does not always align with their assigned sex at birth, and it can evolve over a period of time. So individuals whose biological sex does not match with their gender identity may make both physical and social changes to express their identified gender, and this can include adopting a different name, using preferred pronouns as well, changing their clothing, hairstyle, or even makeup. And some may also pursue medical changes, for instance hormone therapy or gender affirming surgery as well. And this process, all of you know that it's known as transition. Now, in comparison to this, the idea of gender identity, we have another term which is gender expression. So gender expression refers to how a person outwardly demonstrates their gender identity, and it includes physical expressions, for instance clothing, hairstyle, makeup, as well as social expressions like names, pronoun choices. And examples of gender expression include masculine, feminine, androgynous presentations as well. Now, while there are some individuals who maintain a consistent gender expression, others may adjust their expression over a period of time, or even based on different circumstances. So some people explore gender expression for particularly theatrical purposes, such as in drag performances. And there are individuals who can choose to express their gender identity in various ways in different time periods, right? So for some, not feeling safe or comfortable expressing their gender identity can also lead to psychological distress, which highlights the importance of creating a supportive environment where everyone can express their true selves. Now we look at physical sex. So physical sex refers to a person's how the body of a person develops and changes throughout their lifespan, and it includes various biological factors, for instance sex hormones, reproductive organs, secondary sex characteristics, or any other related medical care also, right? And these elements, they contribute to an individual's physical attributes, but do not solely define their gender identity or expression. And understanding the distinction between physical sex, gender identity, and gender expression is essential for a comprehensive view of gender and its complexities. Now let's move on to NEP. I'll talk about the philosophical ideas in NEP 2020 with regard to gender. And my focus will be on school education, and in that also secondary as well as senior secondary education. Now, when you look at NEP 2020, it's a 66-page long document, and the word gender comes 16 times. If you do a simple search, you'll find that gender is coming 16 times. This term called girl, it comes 8 times, and transgender comes 4 times. Now, when we look at NEP with regard to gender, the focus of NEP 2020, when it talks about gender, it particularly focuses on girls, or as well, transgenders as well. And the NEP document indicates that the retention, for instance, I'm now talking about NEP, what the document says. It talks about the retention of girls. It says it's a problem, specifically in secondary and senior secondary level classes. And with regard to the retention of girls, it says that once girls have been enrolled in school, ensuring quality will be the key in retention of students, so that particularly girls and students who come from socio-economically disadvantaged groups, they do not lose interest in attending school. So it also says that this will require a system of incentives for deploying teachers with knowledge of the local languages to areas with high dropout rates, as well as overhauling the curriculum to make it more engaging and useful. Also, the document suggests that the work service conditions, pleasant and decent service conditions, should be provided in schools, and adequate and safe infrastructure, which includes working toilets, clean drinking water, clean and attractive spaces, electricity, computing devices, internet, libraries, etc. they should all be provided along with recreational resources so that teachers and students, which includes children of all grades, they receive a safe, inclusive and effective learning environment, and they are comfortable and they are inspired. The teachers are also inspired to teach and students are also inspired to learn inside the school. The document also reflects on the Indian education system and the government policies, and it says that the government policies, they have made progress, a steady progress towards bridging the gender and social category gaps in all levels of school education. But at the same time, it also it also accepts that large disparities still remain, specifically at the secondary level, particularly for students, for girls who are coming from socioeconomically disadvantaged groups that have been historically and underrepresented in education. Now, when we look at the socio-economically disadvantaged group, SEDGs, they can be broadly classified or categorized based on gender identities also, right? They can be broadly categorized on the basis of socio-cultural identities, right? So, for instance, on the basis of gender identities, we have particularly focus on females and transgender individuals. On the basis of socio-cultural identities, we have this particular focus on scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, OBCs and minorities. Then it talks about geographical identities also, for instance, students who come from villages, small towns and aspirational districts. Then it also talks about students with disabilities, which also includes students which have learning disabilities. And then socioeconomic conditions, for instance, students who come from migrant communities, low income households, children who are in vulnerable situation, victims of trafficking, or who are children of victims of trafficking, right? Then orphans, which includes child beggars in urban areas, and the urban poor as well. So NEP 2020 is suggesting that when you look at the overall enrollment in school, there has been a decline steadily from grade 1 to grade 12. And this decline is significantly more pronounced for many of the socio-economically disadvantaged groups, right? And there's an even greater decline for female students within each of these SEDGs, and often even steeper in higher education. And to tackle this, the document also suggests that we need to undertake research that ascertains what measures are to be taken up, right? What measures are particularly effective for SEDGs. For example, it also talks about providing bicycles, organizing cycling and walking groups to provide access to school, right? Because it says that they have been shown to particularly be powerful methods in increasing participation of female students, right? Even at lesser distances, because of the safety benefits and comforts to parents which they are able to provide. Also, one must note that women cut across all underrepresented groups, right, making up about half of all the SEDGs. Unfortunately, the exclusion and inequity which SEDGs face is only amplified for the women in these SEDGs. The policy NEP 2020 additionally recognizes the special and critical role that women play in society and in shaping social mores, therefore providing a quality education to girls. It says that it's the best way to increase the education level of all the SEDGs, not just in the present but also in the future generations. So the policy is recommending that the policies and schemes which are designed to include students from SEDGs should be specifically targeted towards girls who are a part of these SEDGs. The document is also highlighting that the government of India will come up with a gender inclusion fund. They will constitute a gender inclusion fund so that they can build the capacity of the nation to provide equitable quality of education to all the girls as well as transgender students. And this fund will be available to states to implement priorities determined by the central government, which is critical for assisting female as well as transgender children in gaining access to education, right? So, for instance, provisions of sanitation, toilets, bicycles, cash transfers, etc. Now, so in a sense, what NEP 2020 is aiming for is that any remaining disparity which exists in access to education, right, which also includes vocational education for children from any gender or socio-economically disadvantaged groups should be eliminated. Then there is also provision of free boarding facilities that will be built. So schools like the Jawahar Navodaya Vidyalayas will, they will be built, and particularly students who are coming from SEDGs, for them, such kind of schools will be built more, and then for girls as well. And NEP 2020 also indicates that Kasturba Gandhi Balika Vidyalayas, they will be, which already exist, they will be strengthened and expanded also to increase the participation in quality schools, particularly up to grade 12 of girls who come from socioeconomically disadvantaged backgrounds. And last but not the least, an important provision in NEP 2020 is about gender sensitization. So the document is it's saying that the awareness and knowledge of gender sensitization and sensitization towards all the underrepresented groups and underrepresentation of the groups will be a part of all teacher education programs. So it has something for the teacher education programs as well, which is about students, particularly girls and transgenders and people who are coming from the disprivileged sections of the society. Now, till now, I have covered the various provisions and suggestions which are outlined in the NEP policy document. Now, these elements are crucial as they will be implemented in various ways in the near future. Additionally, another important aspect which is highlighted by the NEP is the need for a transformation in school culture, this transformation of the school culture. And this shift is essential for creating a more inclusive and supportive educational environment that fosters the well being and development of all students, regardless of their gender identity or expression. Now, the NEP document emphasizes the necessity of transforming school culture, as I said just now, and it advocates that all the participants who are a part of the educational system, be it teachers, be it principals, administrators, counselors, and students, they must all be sensitized to the needs of every student as well as to the concepts of inclusion, equity, dignity, and privacy of all individuals. And cultivating such an educational culture will pave the way for students to become empowered individuals, which ultimately will enable society to evolve into one which is more responsible as well as caring towards its citizens. And with this foundation in mind, I would now like to reflect on the possibilities which the NEP 2020 document has opened up. I will discuss how these changes, which I'll talk about, they can foster a more inclusive and equitable educational environment and what opportunities they present for both students and the wider community. Now, first, I'll talk about gender sensitization and how we can actively engage in the process. Now, when you look at gender sensitization, it involves conducting awareness sessions on gender issues so that, the stereotypical gender roles which already exist in the society, they can be challenged and we can create a harassment-free environment and ensure an equal treatment of all the genders. The NEP 2020 envisions gender equality primarily by focusing on female students, where there is some consideration for including transgender children in schools as well. However, there is a noticeable lack of attention to male students in the context of gender education. And it's very important to recognize that boys also grow up with a gendered identity, which is shaped by notions of masculinity and shaped by notions of superiority over other genders. And addressing gender inequality cannot rely solely on focusing on girls and occasionally on transgender individuals, which has happened, right? So we must also engage boys who are socialized to adopt positions of authority over other genders in these conversations, and that is our responsibility. Another important point is having female role models is essential so that we can empower girls and challenge the societal mindset about women's roles. And this can create a positive ripple effect where females encourage each other and set inspiring examples for society. Similarly, establishing male role models who exemplify gender sensitivity and respect for all genders is crucial for boys, reinforcing the importance of equitable behavior. The NEP 2020 emphasizes the need for careful attention to the safety and rights of all students, particularly girl children, and addresses the various challenges which are faced by adolescents, such as substance abuse, discrimination, etc. And at the same time, it also advocates for clear, safe, and efficient mechanism for reporting violations of children's right and safety, ensuring that these mechanisms they are effective, timely, and widely known among students. And to foster gender sensitization, what we can do as teachers, as citizens, as students, uh, we can ensure that wherever we are and wherever we are participating in the school, whether as teachers or trained social workers or even counselors, we have to create an inclusive curriculum. And curriculum is not only about syllabus, but it's also about verbal and non-verbal hidden curriculum. And therefore, it is essential to integrate materials on gender equality into the curriculum itself. And this curriculum should include comprehensive information about various gender identities, so that we can foster respect for diversity. And additionally, biases and stereotypes which are present in the curriculum, they must be addressed, and more relevant and relatable material should be incorporated to reflect the experiences of all the communities. And by implementing these changes, by ensuring that these changes happen, we can create a more inclusive and equitable educational environment for everyone. The second point that I would like to reflect on is this question of the Indian context, particularly how the NEP addresses it and how we can adapt its principles to our local situation. So the NEP 2020 envisions a comprehensive redesign of the curriculum and pedagogy, starting from the foundational stage, to ensure that they are deeply rooted in the Indian and local context. And this encompasses culture, traditions, heritage, customs, languages, philosophy, geography, and ancient as well as contemporary knowledge, right? And societal as well as, which takes care of societal as well as scientific needs. And it also includes indigenous and traditional ways of learning. However, it is also important to acknowledge and to understand that there's a pervasive gender bias in our society. And for instance, in many Indian families, you might have seen a son's education is prioritized over that of a daughter. Girls are often expected to engage in domestic responsibilities, for instance, childcare. They are supposed to do household work, which limits their educational opportunities as well. And this trend, research says, is particularly pronounced in lower income households, rural families, and also in situations where both the parents are working. Moreover, the presence of younger siblings can also negatively impact a girl's education, affecting her attendance and time which is spent on learning activities. Then, early marriage also serves as another significant barrier, which contributes to the dropout rates, particularly in higher education among girls, and restricting their access to education and personal development. Families also, they allocate less funding for girls' education compared to boys, resulting in a higher enrollment of boys in private schools and tuition programs. Additionally, girls are expected to take care of the people who are a part of the household, and from the sons there's an expectation that the sons will provide to their parents in old age, which also leads to a differential treatment in educational enrollment, expenditure, and access to learning resources. Now, when you look at reports, National Commission for Protection of Child Rights in 2020, 2017 says 40% of girls in age 15 to 18, they are out of school. And key barriers to education include accessibility, affordability, and the patriarchal social structures which exist in the society. And given so, the point which I'm trying to make is that given these realities, it is important for us to develop a gender responsive educational curriculum which is able to combat the gender bias and discrimination which exist within the society and also within the educational system. And achieving this transformation requires rethinking the traditional teaching methods, learning resources, and classroom discourse to create a more inclusive environment. And one effective strategy which we can use to address these challenges is the implementation of regular gender sensitization programs at schools, district level, block level, etc. And these programs, they should include teachers, parents, students, and other stakeholders as well, so that there's an awareness which promotes an understanding of gender bias also, and how to mitigate that gender bias as well. And by actively engaging all members of the educational community, we can create a more equitable and inclusive educational environment which paves the way for a society which values and respects all the genders. And through these efforts, we can adapt the NEP's vision to our local context while also addressing the specific challenges which are faced in particular communities. The third point which I want to cover is this crucial topic of sexuality education. In 2018, there's a UNESCO study titled Experiences of Bullying in Schools, a survey among sexual or gender minority youth in Tamil Nadu, which highlights alarming findings. And it says that out of 400 LGBTQ youth which was surveyed, approximately 60% reported being physically bullied in middle schools, and 43% experienced sexual harassment in primary school due to their sexual orientation and gender identity. And furthermore, if you look at the NCRB report from 2017, 109 children are sexually abused every day in India. NFHS 5 from 2019 to 21, the data says that the share of women aged 20 to 24 who married before turning 18 is 23%, right? So these statistics are telling us that we need to now focus. It's very late, but we need to focus on sexuality education in our schools. And this importance cannot be overstated. We know that sexuality education plays a vital role in reducing gender stereotypes, fostering an understanding of diverse gender identities, and it is essential for combating the high dropout rates among particularly the vulnerable groups. And by providing students with accurate and inclusive information about sexuality, we also empower them to a certain extent so that they can make informed choices and promote a more accepting environment. Implementing comprehensive sexuality education can also contribute to creating a positive school environment. And the benefits of having a positive school environment, they are significant. It leads to lower levels of bullying, peer victimization also decreases. There's a reduction in the suspension rate of students, and there's a better psychological and behavior outcomes which come out. And additionally, it also enhances engagement of students and improves the learning outcomes as well. And so the point which I'm trying to make is that through sexuality education we can cultivate an atmosphere of respect and understanding, ultimately contributing to the development of responsible and empathetic individuals. And this approach not only addresses gender related issues but also creates a safer and a more supportive educational environment for all the students. And by prioritizing sexuality education, we can work towards a more equitable society which respects, which values the diversity of all the members, which ensures that we treat all members with respect. Now, to ensure that gender sensitization, to ensure that sexuality education, and there's a dismantling of pervasive gender biases which exist in the society, we need a pedagogical approach, right? We need a pedagogical approach which actively engages students and teachers in critical, participatory, and reflective learning. And now I'll come up with these, I'll talk about these pedagogies which can be used inside the classroom, inside the school setup. The first point which I would like to make is learning from conflict. So usually when we engage with children, we try to avoid conflict. We try to not give them examples which are conflicting. So when you look at children's social experiences, if we want to bring these social experiences into classrooms, it is inevitable that issues of conflict, they must be addressed, right? Because when you look at children's life also, conflict is a part of their life, right? They constantly are encountering situations which call for moral assessment and action, whether in relation to subjective experiences of conflict which involves the self, the family, or the society, or when they are trying to deal with exposure. They have video games, movies, etc., where there's an exposure to violent conflict in the contemporary world also, right? In the news as well. Yet in the official curriculum, we find that knowledge, when it comes to knowledge which is imparted to children, knowledge is treated as neutral, right? So there's an attempt to erase conflict in order to legitimize a certain vision of society and its knowledge, and it's a vision which is related to dominant discourse. Now what I'm suggesting is that we have to use conflict as a pedagogic strategy, right? And by using conflict as a pedagogic strategy, we'll enable children to deal with conflict, and we'll also facilitate awareness of its nature and role in their lives. And to enable children to do this, the curriculum has to, accommodate pedagogic strategies which deal with the idea of conflict, right, between what is observed and valued in contemporary society, right, in the social world which students are inhabiting, and what can be in a gender just and less violent world. Only then the children will be able to learn about alternate ways of being, alternate ways of existing, and they'll be able to respect people who do not associate with the norm with regard to gender, right? So children will be able to learn about alternate ways of being which are usually made invisible or even delegitimized in the society also. And so it involves, when we deal with conflict, we are giving children opportunity to unlearn gender, the gender ideas that they already have, both at the individual as well as collective level. The second point which I would like to make is participation. Now, most feminist educators, they would agree that knowledge is not neutral, and the teacher as well as the student, both of them, they bring texts, right? Texts of their own to the classroom, and these texts, they shape the transactions that happen within the classroom and within the school as well. So, feminist pedagogy, it emphasizes participatory learning and teaching, right, within which subjectivity, emotion and experience, they have a definite and valued place. While participation, all of you will agree, and I also agree, it's a powerful strategy. The problem with participation is that when it is ritualized, right? So participation, when we see participation as an instrument to achieve certain specified or even predetermined objectives, and where the teacher's own ideas, they are dominating the classroom discussion, is not meaningful, right? So it when things go like that, we'll find that uh, you know uh, the right is not happening. So what we need to ensure is that the experience of teacher as well as the student is important, right? And that is how both of them, they are supposed to participate. Now the third point is reading against the grain. Now it is possible and also necessary to be able to equip students to read against the grain. So the meaning is that you have to question the received knowledge. Are you capable of questioning the knowledge that you're receiving? We have to ensure that students are able to do that, right? So whether it is the biased textbook or other literary sources in their own environment, whether things which are happening, if you consider what is happening in the society also as text, are you able to critique it? Now this is an objective that education would aspire for in the higher school, but I believe that in the lower classes also, there's a need to build in approaches which encourage learners to comment, which encourage learners to think, right? Comment, compare, and think about the elements which exist in their own environment. As repositories of knowledge, they exist in different mediums, and all these forms, whether you look at television, advertisements, songs, painting, etc., they are also to be brought inside the classroom, so that a healthy discussion can happen about them, so that there's a dynamic interaction which happens, right, which is initiated between the learners themselves. And lateral learning processes, they necessitate new equations between the teacher and the student. The fourth point I would like to talk about is acknowledging power. A gender sensitive pedagogy is one that does not merely affirm different individual and collective experiences, but also at the same time it locates these within the larger structures of power. Questions, for instance, who is allowed to speak for whom? Whose knowledge is most valued, right? We must ask these questions, and we must have such kinds of engagements with the learners. And this means that we now need to evolve different strategies for different learners. For example, encouraging a child to speak in class may be important for some children, and at the same time, learning to listen to others may be of priority, right? The fifth point is the role of the teacher as a facilitator. When you look at the teacher is supposed to provide a safe space for children to express themselves, and at the same time build a certain form of interactions. Now while consolidating and constructively pushing the limits of the learner's understanding, the teacher also needs to be conscious as to how differences are also expressed inside the classroom. And for this, an atmosphere of trust, it is essential, because it is the atmosphere of trust which makes the classroom a safe space where children are able to share experiences, where the conflict which exists in the classroom, in the society, in the school can be acknowledged, and at the same time constructively questioned as well. and their resolutions. These resolutions, I'm not telling you that these resolutions are to be final. They can be tentative, but the teacher and the students, they have to mutually work out these resolutions. So a space where the teacher as well as the students, they can practice these things, a space where teacher works as a facilitator, enabling democratic ways of interacting with each other and building skills to negotiate with conflicts which exist outside the school, is very important. And the sixth, which is the last point but not the least point, is encouragement of questioning the curriculum and what counts as school knowledge. So we need to now then break down the hierarchies. We need to break down the power networks which include which are excluding transgenders, girls, women's, LGBTQ, whether as pupils or teachers. We need to understand the conditions which are leading to bullying. We need to understand the conditions which lead to racism, for instance, sexism, for instance, homophobic behavior. And then only we'll be able to develop successful forms of interventions, right? So the point which I want to make here is that we must also take into consideration the experience and knowledge of the pupil also, and also ensure that students are involved in planning and evaluating their educational work as well at the level of the school as well, right? So increased critical consciousness among students and ability to challenge narrowed conceptions, ability to challenge stereotypes and prejudices are essential, and these can only be inculcated if the people who are working with children, they are empowered, they themselves are empowered, they themselves know how to conduct things, they themselves know how they are supposed to behave. So what I'm trying to tell you today is the pedagogical approaches which I've just highlighted, they are essential in creating an educational environment which actively challenges gender biases, which promotes inclusivity also, and at the same time which also promotes the development of empowered learners, critical learners. And by addressing the root causes of gender inequality and encouraging students to reflect on their experiences, these strategies can lead to more meaningful and long lasting change in both the school culture as well as the society at large. And through participatory, reflective learning, critical learning, we can help students of all genders develop the tools which they need to, create a more just and equitable world. So I'm making this argument that National Education Policy 2020, it can be used as a foundational document to guide us toward a gender just society. However, ensuring that this transformation happens, we have to make sure that we go beyond the literal interpretation of the recommendations which are made by NEP, and to truly create a gender sensitive and inclusive environment in schools, we need to first deepen our understanding of gender issues, sexuality, gender identity, gender expression. Some parts of it were highlighted by me in the initial minutes of this webinar. And by equipping ourselves with this knowledge, we can meaningfully engage in this process of gender sensitization and contribute positively to the school environment. And it will also help us to design pedagogical practices and curriculum which is not only addressing the concerns which are raised by NEP 2020, but at the same time we'll be able to introduce necessary reforms from our side so that we can tackle deeply ingrained biases and inequalities which exist in the educational setup, inside the school, inside the classroom, as well as in the society. And I believe a gender just society is possible when we, as educators, we as social scientists, we as citizens, we play a proactive role in promoting equity, inclusivity, and nurturing a new generation which respects diversity, and which nurturing a generation which is able to challenge the existing stereotypes that exist in the society. And this holistic understanding then will empower us as administrators, as teachers, as civil society, as students, to shape schools into a safe, inclusive space, into a equitable space, ensuring that the goals which are outlined by the NEP, they lead to meaningful societal change. So that is from my side. Thank you for giving me this opportunity, and now I look forward to listening to the audience for your queries, comments, whatever. Thank you so much, Pooja. Over to you.
Ma'am, yes. Ma'am, there is a question from Indrani Chakrabarti. Ma'am, the question is, considering the national education policy emphasizes student safety and well-being, why are private schools not providing secure environment? Specifically, does NEP include clauses ensuring student safety protocols, bullying prevention measures, emergency response plans, accountability mechanisms? Ma'am, your clarification on this question would be appreciated.
Okay. So, Indrani, when you look at the NEP, it's a guiding document, right? NEP does not include everything. And for that matter, any policy, we have had policies before this as well, they will not include everything, right? They are policies which guide us, right? So, for instance, we have different institutions in the society. We have government institutions also, we have colleges, universities, we have civil society organizations as well working. So the policy gives us an opportunity to think about certain things, right? And then it's up to the institutions how they interpret it, how they go beyond it, and this is what I reflected in my lecture also. So do not, I would suggest that do not look out for terms. If you only look out for terms in the policy, you might feel that they are missing, but that is not, that should not stop you from bringing in all these questions, all these ideas which you have asked in your question, right? So the point again which I'm trying to make is that go beyond what is written, and also think beyond what is there, right? And then make use of the policy and bring in your own inputs, and then maybe at your own level at the institution, for instance, in which you work, you can think of bringing all these aspects into for instance institutional laws that you are developing in your own institution.
Okay, ma'am. There is another question. What are the potential uses of the inclusion fund set up by the NEP?
Okay, so this gender fund is particularly for girls, and it's for transgenders. So we'll see in the future how it is, it comes up and how it is used. As of now, it's there in the policy, but we'll have to look at the field when it comes. Maybe we'll do researches and then we'll find out how it works.
Ma'am, are there any improvements to be made in the NEP that could potentially better the current situation of gender awareness lacking in our education system?
Okay, I am a person who believes working in the field, who I will not go by what is written, but I would rather focus on what is happening and how I can contribute.
Mhm.
So I would suggest that even if you write things, society does not change, right? Like that.
Mhm.
If you really want to see a difference, you work in the society. But at the same time, if something is written, maybe people will be impacted by that. But at the same time, when I started the lecture, I said that it's a policy, right? It's providing you guidelines. It's not mandatory unless and until there's a gazette which says so. My suggestion is read what is written and then also go beyond that. And if you really want to see a change, go in the field and try and give your best. But first, empower yourself academically, knowledge wise. Empower yourself so that if you're nothing, if you're not empowered, how can you empower others?
Yes,
So,
ma'am.
if, for instance, if you want to work in the realm of gender, you first understand what gender is, right? How gender
Mhm.
impacts, what are the different, you can say, sides of gender. Sexuality is not something which is separate, right? You also need to talk about
Yes,
then
ma'am.
sexuality, right? Gender identity, gender expression. You have to be first clear about all these things yourself. Yes.
And the next question is, are there any particular opportunities for marginalized sections to be included in the gender awareness program?
What kind of gender awareness programs is this person specifically talking about? Any specific kind of gender awareness programs?
No, ma'am. I guess it's like in
Is it
context of the NEP.
Can you please repeat the question again?
Are there any particular opportunities for marginalized sections to be included in the gender awareness programs?
See, NEP talks about, I told you about socioeconomically disadvantaged sections, right? This is how it
Mhm.
talks about marginalized sections, talks in talks about women transgenders, and then it talks about SEDGs separately also. And in SEDGs, because we all understand gender is we cannot look at gender in a vacuum. We have to look at intersections of gender as well. So see, this whole idea of awareness, it talks about awareness, and at the same time it also talks about uh, I think there's something wrong. Whiteboard, there's a whiteboard. So okay, we came back. So it talks about certain groups, right? How there will be certain things for certain groups, but when it comes to awareness, it talks about awareness, but again, what kinds of programs they have to be built, they have to be developed, etc. We need to think about that. We cannot restrict ourselves to only what is written. Otherwise, if we only go by what is written, we'll be not thinking of the broader picture.
Okay, ma'am. The next question is like, does the NEP allow for flexibility in its constitution to accommodate newer rules and policies that could be implemented? If so, what is the immediate need of the hour that NEP requires according to you?
See, I discussed that in the initial minutes as well. It is only providing you guidelines. It's up to
Mhm.
institution how they want to implement these guidelines, right? How they want to interpret it, and how they want to include other things into that, right? So in a sense, it's not restricting you. So then it depends on the institutions, the people who are involved. So for instance, each institution by now has a committee which is looking into the implementation of NEP into their own institution, particularly when you look at universities or colleges, institutions which are associated with education, right? Even at school level as well. So it's up to those people who are part of those. If they are empowered, if they know things, then very good. If the things are on the other side, then we'll see other repercussions.
Okay, ma'am. The next question is from Narendra Singh. How does the National Education Policy NEP 2020 aim to support persons with disabilities in accessing quality education? And what specific provisions does it outline for improving the inclusivity and effectiveness of schools for children with special needs?
Okay, so within SEDGs, it talks about children with special needs. Then it also talks about infrastructure, right? That we have to provide infrastructure for children with special needs. Then it also, talks about we already have, a reservation system in place, which where some seats are reserved for students with special needs, people with special needs, right? So then it talks about in general how we need to develop a sense where people who come from marginalized sections, they don't feel that they are outsiders, right? So it talks about inclusivity also. It talks about in general how in the curriculum we need to take into consideration that people of different needs exist in the society. Then uh, for instance, it talks about women. Certain things are to be provided to women, certain things are need to be taken care in the context of transgenders. Similar fashion, particularly in the context of SEDGs, it talks about people with people who have special needs people, I would say, not people with disabilities. I would say I would rather use this term, people with special needs.
Okay, ma'am. We have another question. The question is from Damodar Lal Meena. How can the NEP 2020 be leveraged to enhance the participation of LGBTQ students in the education system, and what specific measures are being taken to create a safe and supportive environment for them?
See, I told you NEP, when it comes to gender, it talks about women. Certain times the word has come, and then certain times transgenders, the word has come. Apart from that, focuses much on women. With regard to LGBTQ, it does not, it talks about, with regard to gender, it talks about accessibility, right? For instance, it talks about barriers which does not allow people who come from certain sections to enter into academic spaces. It also talks about the dropout which happens, right? But other than that, for instance, LGBTQ gender expression, that is why I talked about gender expression, right? I differentiated between gender expression and gender identity. So those aspects are, missing, I would say.
Okay,
So this
ma'am.
is something, as I'm reiterating it again, it's up to the institutions, it's up to the people who are a part of those committees, how they want to, read what is written, and also make use of the knowledge which exists outside the domain of the policy, right? Knowledge which can help us to bring people together, knowledge which can ensure that the space becomes inclusive, the space is developed in a manner that people from different sections, people who are, who do not fall into the mainstream, right? Particularly with regard to their gender identity or even expression, they can also, come up and they feel secure, they feel appreciated, right? So it's up to us, because we are part of institutions. It's up to us how. And the point, one of the points of my presentation is that agency. Whenever you read any text, a text can tell you a lot about things, but at the same time, as teachers, as institution builders, as participants who are part of institutions, we have agency, and we must make use of that agency, right? So even if something might not be, saying about some particular idea, but then at the same time, uh, when a teacher is given a text, all teachers will teach the text in different manner, right? So agency is something which is with us, we must make use of that agency. I think Pooja left. Something might have happened at her end.
I think she got disconnected because of this network issue. She is trying to join again.
I understand.
So, ma'am, meantime, can I ask one more question then? I think.
Yeah, Narendra, go ahead.
Okay. So, ma'am, actually, I'm
Narendra, can you be a little louder? I
yeah,
can't
yeah,
hear
yeah.
you.
I'll. Is it audible now, ma'am?
You switch on your video as well.
Okay, ma'am. I hope now it's like okay. So, ma'am, I want to ask one more thing. The student from particularly I'm talking
Keep the
about
mic near to your
okay.
mouth.
Like the student like from the DNTs, denotified tribes, okay, and then so how this NEP is going to address, because what I found is that in their respective
Let me use
areas,
my earphone. Ah,
okay,
let
in
me
the
use my earphone.
okay, you use it.
Now, please continue.
Okay. So what I found like during my fieldwork also, like in their respective areas, they are do not having like schools more they just have the primary schools, not more than that. Okay. So is like an NEP going to like look for like any kind of like solution or maybe the approach for them? This is what I want to ask.
See, till independence, this is the third policy, right? So the situation of schools that you're talking about is what you're talking is correct. I'm not disregarding that. What again I'll say is that you can come up with n number of policies, but at the same time, if things are not happening in the field, then that is a problem, right? So it's a guideline. It gives you a vision. It gives you an opportunity to think. It provides you avenues, new avenues जिसके बारे में आप सोच सकते हो, बात कर सकते हो. But again, what kinds of laws do you develop? uh, what happens at state level, right? State government, then we have different school boards, how they look at that, what what resources are available. Money is also very important, right? So all these things will decide what will happen to the schools. Only one document cannot change things. Rinder, my idea, was it clear to you?
Yes, ma'am, it's making sense also. Like, yeah, it's very clear. Thank you for that.
Good evening, ma'am. Ma'am, can I ask my question?
Please, Smriti, please go ahead.
You provide any question, please.
Uh, uh, Ma'am, actually, like my question is, like it is being drawn from an article which I was going through, like for some days back. It is Krishna Kumar's article, "Growing Up as a Male," in which he talked about how when he admitted to secondary school, how gender segregation takes place and how it make even both the gender it is giving a sense of distant other to the towards other gender. So, and also, I would like to substantiate it with a news which came like an year or I guess a 2 year before, in which a Bihari man, when he was going for an exam in a particular center in which there were only women, so he fainted with this anxiety that there were only girls. So, ma'am, how do you see and how the education policy see these kind of gender segregation and how even in the co-ed school, how do we see this exclusionary practices in which we see the other gender as a distant other?
Okay. See, NEP talks about inclusivity, right? And talks about women, issues of women also, making them feel safe, etc. But at the same time, when you look at the society, the educational setup of any nation for that matter is embedded in a society. And at the same time, when you look at the interaction between society and education, both are able to impact each other, right? So for instance, you might have seen in schools, it is the teacher sometimes who appreciate this division of the students. So girls will sit on one side, boys will sit on one side, right? That might have uh, been I don't know whether it was in your case or not, but they do it. So unless, and NEP also talks about training, right? It talks about teacher training and says that in teacher training all these issues they have to be addressed. Now what happens, the same idea, right? We are embedded in a society, and when a child comes to school, the child is has spent a considerable amount of time inside his family itself. And at the same time, when you look at the school, the teacher is there, the principal, etc., and all the people, even non-teaching staff who are there, they come from a certain kind of society, right? So unless and until the idea which I'm suggesting, the idea which I support is education and society. If you want the society to change, they'll have to work together, right? And Krishna Kumar makes a what he's suggesting is I'm not saying it's wrong, it's correct, right? So even schools, they promote that. But you can come up with, again, you can write anything on paper, but is that going to change the things which are happening in the school? We have to see. But at the same time, I'm not saying that changes are not happening. Even when we are talking, changes are taking place. Uh, when you're able to ask this question, right? You are pursuing PhD. We have students who are MA students and pursuing their PhDs. They have come from schools. Many of you have come from such schools. I also have come from such schools, but we are able to ask such difficult questions. So that itself means that education has brought a change. Our training has brought a change, and we will bring changes in the spaces that we, engage with, the places where we'll go, right? So the document talks about all these things. I'm not saying clearly, but it touches upon all these things. But at the same time, the our role becomes very important. The role of people like us becomes very important, and that is what I was, indicating towards. That we must play a very proactive role. Read the document, but at the same time, at our own levels, because we are aware of all such things. So we must, work in that direction. We must not stop ourselves कि पॉलिसी के अंदर नहीं लिखा है तो ये नहीं होगा. That is the idea.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Smriti, and thank you others also for asking such interesting questions and giving me an opportunity. I think Prabhat Sharma has a question. He raised a hand.
So, good evening, ma'am.
Good evening, Prabhat.
Ma'am, National Education Policy 2020, can we say that it is like the Plato's philosopher king ideology?
You can say anything. It's up to you.
Ma'am, the methodology which was in the pedagogy, na, ma'am, that the child is reared without any perspective, male or female, and then based on the interest, she or he is reared in the conditions, whatever interest, whether you want to opt for science or whether you opt for humanities. So it's kind of a mixed combination, mixed baggage of all things, and based on the
See, today I'm here to talk about gender. There's a
okay,
lot of, we can talk about, NEP n number of times. There will be no end to this discussion, but today I came to talk about gender. So maybe someday else we'll, talk about the other issues that you're pointing towards.
okay, ma'am. So, and second is the economic independence of women. I mean, in some cases, has resulted in the rise of hyper-feminism in the society. Can we say that on this issue?
I don't agree with that.
Okay,
I'll
okay, ma'am.
simply say I don't agree with that.
Ma'am,
Just because
that,
women are earning, they're asking for what they, what they should have been given earlier. That does not mean it's hyperfeminism. You can give it any term, but what is women's, rightfully women's, you cannot say that it should not be given because it's hyperfeminism. So
no,
I
no,
don't
ma'am. I'm
agree.
not saying hyper-feminism. The sideline is the demand for the collective idea of women rights is kind of a stratified way, ma'am. No, it's not a single unilinear way to ask for the demands, ma'am. So
Again,
it's
okay.
kind of projected as a hyper-feminism in the society.
I'll say because today I'm here to talk about NEP and the issue of gender. We
Okay,
have with us Dr. Longoi also. She teaches feminism, right?
okay, okay, okay.
So maybe we can have a talk sometime later about all these things. We need, a session on feminism then to discuss all this. We need to look at the history of feminism, right? And where different kinds of demands have come up in history and what are the reasons, right? And how the society has looked at all these issues also.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, I'm not disregarding your question. I'm just saying that we need, more time and we need a different sphere to talk about all these things, because then we'll have to go back again. We have to trace the history of ideas and how shifts have happened in the feminist movements as well. But thank you so much for asking that question.
Thank you, ma'am. It's my pleasure,
that
ma'am.
that makes our discussion engaging, and that also the speaker also feels happy that the uh, whosoever is there, they are asking relevant questions, and these things are coming to their minds.
Ma'am, there is an announcement for those who are in the audience. People who have joined late or missed parts of today's session, the recording will be available on NRJ's Facebook page. The link will be shared in the chat box. To stay updated on future webinars, kindly follow our Facebook page. Any more questions from the audience? Well, I guess that's all for today.
One thing which I want to, because we are, we'll go to our own spaces now. Documents, they are important because they provide us opportunities to talk about them. Now it's up to us how we make use of those documents and go beyond the documents also. So the relevance of the document is there, but at the same time we need to then think, reflect and question and talk about it, and that is how we move forward. Discussion is important, so we are here for that discussion and we did that, and I'm happy, and I'm sure, please, you don't have to agree with me, you don't have to accept all the points, but at least we came together and we uh, talked about something that itself brings out the relevance of the document, right? NEP, we are talking about NEP 2020, that tells us that it's important, it's relevant, right? Jagendra, I see a hand. Yes.
Yes, ma'am. Good evening, ma'am.
Good evening, Jagendra. Please
I
continue.
want to know the politics of gender in the college and university NEP 2020, in which things we involve the gender politics and the hierarchy upon the caste and class who belong to this section of marginalized of the society. In which NEP 2020 we saw the case in, I mean, Noida, in after 2 months in Noida in the PG, some women are left the hostel in PG in Noida, ma'am. So which type of NEP, the education minister and education policy ask the question towards the privatization of the education. This thing is not the safe, and the one thing is, yes, ma'am.
Jagendra, again, I have the same answer. You cannot search all the answers in the document.
Yes.
You have to go beyond the document. You can refer to the document, right? So it, uh, with regard to, for instance, women, it talks about inclusivity, and when it comes to inclusivity, it talks about inclusivity of everyone, right? But again, gender pe focus, jab gender ki baat karte hain, so the focus is on women and transgenders. It does not talk about socialization of men, for instance, right? It does not even talk about sexuality, for that matter, gender expression, bisexuals, trans, all these orientations also.
Yes.
ऑल आपके सवाल सारे आपको अगर उन सवालों का जवाब ढूंढना है तो आपको वहां तक सीमित नहीं रहना है, पढ़ना है उसको, और साथ ही साथ बाहर भी और चीजें भी पढ़ेंगी आपको, then you will be able to get a better answer.
Yes.
NEP is not going to solve all the problems of your life or all the problems that exist in the society, and we must not also look for the solution in only that document.
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Ma'am.
Yes, Pooja.
Ma'am, we need to end this session as we are running out of time.
I understand, yes.
Just a minute, ma'am. Ma'am, thank you for your valuable words. We, the NRJ team, are really honored to have you as our guest speaker today. We also hope that this discussion has benefited to the concerned audience today. Thank you again for joining us, and we hope to have future collaborations with you, ma'am. And with this, I would like to conclude today's webinar session. And also, thank you to all the active participants and to their engaging questions. We appreciate your valuable questions, and I guess that's all for today. And anyone to get uh, notifications about Enajuri can stay updated through Enajuri's Facebook page.
Thank you so
That's
much,
all for
Pooja.
today, ma'am.
Thank you, Kashmira. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you to Milind. Thank you, Anna Jori, and thank you to all the participants. Thank you, Dr. Longkoi, for taking out time. And we have scholars. Most of these people I know, and they have taken out time from their busy schedule to attend. So I'm highly obliged also and happy also that they have come, and Damodar, Narendra, Sagar, and everyone जिसका नाम भी मैं नहीं ले पा रही हूँ, but they are there. Thank you so much, Smriti, Jagendra, everyone, for coming, and thank you. So many thanks to Anna Jori for inviting me, Kashmira for taking this initiative, and thank you so much, Pooja, for being a helpful host and a vibrant host. And all the best. I wish Anna Jori all the best, and I hope they'll do well. And we're always at your service. If you need anything from our side, we'll support you. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.